Welcome to the Stress-Free Dentist Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Block. As always, I want to inspire, entertain, and educate you on the best tools and technologies out there. My goal is to help make your practice and career more profitable, efficient, and most importantly, more enjoyable. And check out all of my nonfiction and children's books on Amazon, and check out the stressfreedentist.com for any upcoming events. And if you're feeling you're a dental professional that's burnt out, or you just feel stuck or want to get to that next level, visit the International Academy of Dental Life Coaches or www.iadlc.com, and we'll get you matched up with a life coach that understands dentistry. I also wanted to thank our amazing sponsor, Equa Marketing. They have helped me and my practice over the years to improve with SEO and website performance. And to find out how you can make your practice dominate in your area, go to www.equa.com/MSMSFD to book your complimentary meeting. Again, that's www.ekwa.com/MSMSFD. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode. And today I'm joined by Dr. Chris Griffin. Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Man, Eric, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm excited to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, I want to get into all about your book and everything you're doing regarding teaching and 3D printing. You have, quite the story and a lot to share, but I first just want to get into your story of how you even decided to become a dentist.
Well, I started out at Mississippi State University in engineering because I guess I just thought in high school, if you're good at math and science, you're supposed to be an engineer. So I started out doing that, and I quickly realized that a lot of engineering is sitting behind a desk in front of a computer all day. And while I do like that to some extent, I'm also kind of an outdoors guy. So, I knew that wasn't for me. So like the path was, I started in petroleum engineering of all things. And my college roommate ended up, mega wealthy, owned his own oil company and all that. But I swapped to biological engineering because I always liked science. And then I realized that, hey, I love engineering, but it's pretty hard. So if I want to get into dental school, which I'd started thinking about, I'd better do something that I don't run the risk of getting a C in a course. So I swapped from that to microbiology, and that's what that's how that when I got in dental school, I was taking microbiology classes. So that's kind of how it happened. And I got into dental school after 3 years, and I was off to the races, really too young to understand how crazy it was. I got married 1 week before dental school started. So also too young to realize how crazy that was. At age 20 and 19, my wife was 19, I was 20. So.
Wow. And where'd you go to dental school?
University of Tennessee.
Okay. And then after dental school, what'd you do? Did you specialize? Did you do a GPR? Did you go right into private practice?
I don't know how many people have had a similar experience with their associateship, but I went in right after dental school with my family dentist, loved the guy, thought I'd be there forever. In fact, I would have tried harder in dental school if I had known that it wasn't going to work out with him, because I always kind of wanted to be an orthodontist, but I thought it was such a sweetheart of a deal. I just said, okay, I'm just going to get, A's and B's and occasional C and skate on by. Finished, barely above midway point in my class probably. And so I went into practice with him, and it didn't work out. So after 1 year, I'm out of there. My wife's expecting our first child, and I'm unemployed. And we're home in the middle. I live in Mississippi, the middle of nowhere. And she didn't really want to move, and I didn't blame her. She's about to have her first child, And so I just buckled down, bought a small house in town, a 3-bedroom house, and my grandfather, myself, and a retired carpenter renovated that thing for 60 days. We opened up September 1st, 1999. I got my first paycheck October 15th, 1999, and that's how that got started. Now, interestingly, I'm in the middle of blue collar, nowheresville, right? 50% of the population is on some sort of Medicaid or government assistance, but I refused to take Medicaid because I just thought, I was kind of, I was 25 at the time, and I thought, man, I love all these magazines have these beautiful photos of cosmetic dentistry, and I really like that stuff. So instead of treating the population around me, I actually went to these institutes that taught me how to do amazing cosmetic dentistry, LVI, Pete Dawson's Continuum. And, I was big in the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry. And you know what? Trying to have a completely fee-for-service cosmetic dental practice in Ripley, Mississippi, population 6,000 with 50% of the population on Medicaid did not work out, Eric, shockingly. And I tried to make it work for a few years. And I kind of feel like at some point, the good Lord sent me a message. And I woke up one day and we had the 400-year flood, which had flooded my practice. And I was down for a few weeks trying to get it recovered from that. And during those few weeks, I said, this is really stupid what I'm trying to do. And I took the time off. It's always dangerous when a dentist has time off, but I took the time off and I joined 20 PPOs in 3 weeks. I had never been on a PPO in my whole career. I joined 20 in 3 weeks, completely changed the way I practice. And, the money was no problem at that point. The problem was, are you going to break your back, break your elbow, break your neck, trying to treat all the patients that are coming in for a third of your previous fee? And so I did that for several years. And then I think the good Lord sent me another sign, and I woke up. Well, I got a call one night, and lightning had struck my office, a 14-op, totally paid off practice, and it had burned down. And so I was dentally homeless. And so I was actually down that time for 16 months. I actually had to move 7 miles away, and I went from 14 ops to 4.5 ops for 16 months. That was awful experience. Had a huge staff. A lot of them left. I lost 75% of my staff, 75%. I think it was 92 years of dental experience I lost during those first few months after the fire, and I was miserable. And so we got rebuilt 2014, and once I got the new building built, I quit fighting with insurance, which, by the way, it's an awful experience. I hope this never happens to you, but just getting insurance to pay what they're supposed to pay, shocking again, right? It's tough, even on a burned down house. But once I was through that, man, I was just done with dentistry. I'd lost a lot of my fire. And so I sort of rocked along for a few years, just kind of being somewhat miserable, but just going through the motions. And then, I know it sounds crazy, but during COVID, of all things, I just, I was off for 6 weeks or whatever it was. And for whatever reason, I bought a 3D printer. I started getting into that, and that sort of reignited what passion I had for dentistry. And so there we are. And that's pretty much my dental life arc.
Wow. That is quite the story. Let's go back to, 1999. You said you had no job. You had a baby on the way, but you hard work and you made things happen, and you built your own practice from nothing. And I know a lot of the younger grads out there or students are worried about all the debt they're in. Just tell me about that experience and how you're able to come through that and all that stress you were going through.
Well, I worked so hard to renovate that house that I didn't have time I was too tired to be stressed. But you're right. Money was a problem. Like, I guess I've always, a lot of my family are bankers, and they're always anti-debt, right? I mean, the banks make money on debt, but they advise the family members don't ever get in debt. So I don't like debt. I borrowed the least that I possibly could. I mean, I'm not kidding. We would tear 2x4s and 1x4s out of the house we were remodeling. And my grandfather would sit under a magnolia tree. He's 75 years old at the time. He got some sawhorses. He would lay the wood out on the sawhorses that we were pulling out of the walls really carefully. And then he would saw them and make them into a smaller size piece of wood that was still sturdy. And then we would reuse all that wood we could. And we just tried everything possible to save money. I was the cleanup crew, so I was a carpenter during the day. And then when my grandpa and the retired carpenter went home at 5 o'clock, I would stay till probably 9 o'clock every night at least, just cleaning up the construction mess and dust and getting prepared for the next day. While that's going on, I'm negotiating with a dental supply company, trying to get the equipment in there. And I bought some used equipment, very little new equipment. And, I don't know. It was such a blur to get going. I'm proud I did it. I couldn't do it again. If I'm 51 now, there's no way I've got the energy to do it now. Right. So if it burns down or if I have a problem again, I think I'm just going to go to the house, like call up one of my buddies and say, "Hey, can I come work for you?" So,
And then when was the flood? When did the flood hit? It
it was 2009.
was about 10 years later.
Yeah.
And that at that point you said to yourself you're going to you started to add the PPOs, correct?
Yeah, I had spent at that time, 7, 8 years trying to be a fee for service cosmetic dentist, spending a ton on marketing, just really, doing the thing, the pictures and sending people flowers after a big case, all that stuff, and just, stressing over every little micrometer on the veneer margins. And, I just said, man, are you crazy? Because yeah, it's good to be able to do a cosmetic case, but the people around here, they need someone that's taken their factory PPO or I didn't take Medicaid at that time, but that was my population. And so I just completely swapped, but it did lead to some changes. Like I had like 3 employees when I was fee for service. So I had to bump it up before the fire, I was up to 14 employees, right? So we were getting a third of our normal fees for everything, but we got really, really efficient. And in fact, for a period of time, I actually did lectures on office productivity. Like in 2010, I did a big lecture, and my claim to fame back in those days was I can do three times the national average production working 3 days a week. So even though I was seeing 20 PPOs and busting my tail, I was only working 3 days a week by that time. And so I'd work really hard for 3 days, and then I would be off 4 days. That's kind of how that worked.
And when was the fire? What year was the fire?
2013.
Okay, so 4 years later, your 14 op office burns down.
Yes.
And then did you rebuild? And at that point, you said you're no longer going to take PPOs?
Well, no. Well, what we actually stayed on most of the PPO plans for the next few years, but during COVID, I decided, okay, I'm going to wind this down. So I started getting off of them. But at that time, I said, okay, I don't want to lose all these active patients. I think at that time maybe had 3,000 active patients. And I said, what can I do to counteract losing? Because I know a lot of people are going to leave. And so I started an in-office membership plan. And so first I cut Blue Cross because that was the biggest pain in my butt. I didn't like them at all. And so I cut them first. And I made a deal with my staff. I said, we're gonna cut a PPO every 50 new members we get. And we're also going to have like a pizza party or whatever to celebrate. So we did that. And when we get to 800 members, I'm going to take you guys to Disney World. That's how happy I'm going to be. And so we've now cut it down to 3 PPOs. The last 3 are tough. One of them is the school system. And I hate to do that to the teachers. One of them's Delta Dental, which I hate. But at the same time, I've got like 1,250 active patients with Delta Dental because Ashley Furniture Factory is right next door. And I forget the third one, but there's a reason why. So I am going to eventually cut those, I hope, again, but it's fine. I'm not killing myself because I get fee for service, fee 1 on so much more stuff. Every year since COVID has been our best year we ever had. And it's not just me. I know maybe you too, but a lot of people I talk to are having some of their best years since COVID.
Yeah, we similarly after COVID, we strategically started to drop our smallest PPOs with the least amount of patient population, and we saw we could do it successfully. And then the next year we dropped more, and then 2 years ago we dropped Blue Cross, which was 25% of our practice, and then This past year we dropped Delta, which was about 50% of our practice. So we're totally
Congratulations,
out of
man.
network. And
I'm proud of
I
you.
thank you. I couldn't be happier. And I think like you've done, you got to do it strategically. You can't just all of a sudden drop everything because patients will leave, not all of them. But I always tell the patients that do leave, you're more than welcome to come back. And we also, we offer a membership plan as well. Now, tell me about how you got the 3D printing bug.
Well, I had actually purchased a 3D printer in 2012, a big old $25,000 Envision Tech boat anchor type thing, and it's huge, and it was so slow. And back then, there were no FDA approved resins, and so all we really did with it was we rigged up a piece of styrofoam, and if somebody came in with an old denture we wanted to duplicate, instead of doing the old acrylic duplicator, we would throw their old denture, glue it together, put it on the styrofoam, shoot a cone beam, then convert the DICOM file out of the cone beam into an STL file, and then print it in that Envision Tech. Took about 4 hours. And then we would use that as like the starting point to make a new denture for them. So just take a wash inside and send it to the lab. And I actually did so much of that I did a lecture on that in 2015 where I outlined the whole process. I think it's the first lecture in the whole world on a digital 3D printed denture, right? But I don't think a single person in the audience, they were all just looking at me like I was, a dog doing algebra. They're like, nobody did that. Nobody took me up on it. Nobody tried it, I don't think. And then so I just kind of, after the fire, I let things slide. And during COVID, I bought a new setup, new 3D printer, a lot faster. There are now resins I could use in patients' mouths, and I was like in hog heaven. I pulled out all my old design software. There were new design softwares, and tried to learn everything I possibly could. Back then, in 2020, there were not a lot of training programs for 3D printing, so I pretty much just had to watch webinars and videos where I could find them. A guy that's a couple of years behind me in dental school named Corey Glenn. He had videos out, so I knew him a little bit, and I watched his videos. And he's a genius, a lot smarter than me, and he does a lot more complicated stuff than me. But he kind of helped get me started down the path. And then I just the year 2020, I kind of dedicated that to 3D printing, basically.
Very similar. Also, I think right around when you started, I bought an old filament printer. And I was using Blue Sky Bio. I learned a lot from Corey Glenn as well. And I was printing my own surgical guides, and it was like this hot glue gun style of printer. And I would print it overnight because it took about 4 hours to print a surgical guide. And, that's pretty much all I did. And then I think also about the year after COVID, I got a nice DLP printer, and I love 3D printing. It's re-energized me. It's fun. The staff loves it. We no longer, we're fully digital, so we don't do any impressions or stone anymore. What would you say the biggest changes that 3D printing has helped you in your practice?
Oh, well, it's the speed of delivery, like the speed to get from diagnosis to case acceptance to actually starting a case. I think that's the biggest difference, because before, you're kind of at the mercy of the lab. You talked about surgical guides. I mean, you may have had a better surgical guide lab than me before you started doing your own. But in my case, it was around 3 weeks, sometimes a month before I would get the surgical guides back. I mean, there are people that in the past they were hot for implants. And by the time the surgical guide came in, they were not hot anymore. Some people even decided just to wait after I already had the surgical guide made. And, maybe that's on me for not being the world's best salesman, but some of it had to be on waiting 30 days. Right. So now, I could do, you could too, I'm sure, do a surgical guide same day, but, I usually do them same week for sure. Couple of days, sounds about right for a surgical guide. And, people are still pretty excited about getting their implant just, a week after you diagnose it and get them talk to them about the treatment. So I think the speed of delivery, in my case too, we've gotten huge into dentures. Of course, my area, you can imagine dentures are a big deal around here. So many people have tried meth And if they survive, they need dentures. And so digital dentures, we do same day dentures, immediates anyway, immediate dentures. And yeah, I mean, that's changed. This has been biggest change I could see is how quickly you can get into treatment.
And so you mentioned surgical guides and dentures. What else are you printing?
Well, we're big into we print everything you can print. Night guards. Even though I'm not a huge night guard provider, but we do some. All our models, of course. Everybody that's in this should be into that. Clear aligners is our biggest ROI. I didn't know it would be. I've always kind of liked clear aligners. I was in one of the first ever Invisalign classes they did for certification for GPs down in Dallas, Texas, gosh, over 20 years ago now. So I've been doing clear aligners a long time, but man, writing those checks to Invisalign or Clear Correct for about $2,000 a case, that was getting old. And people around here, if I'm getting charged that from the lab, I was having to charge $5,000 for an Invisalign case, really, to make it worth our while. And so now we design the cases in-house, and after we printed the models and made the aligners to go on them, we're $200 into a case instead of $2,000. So we really made back our initial investment on 3D printing just from clear aligner cases in the first month.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, let's get into some help for the dentists out there. What would you say are some of the biggest mistakes you've made in your career?
Well, most of my mistakes are self-inflicted. I make bad decisions, right? Well, we talked about one, trying to be a fee-for-service dentist was not the brightest idea, but I did obtain some skills. But as you go through the whole arc of my career, I think, I sort of vary between trying to do everything myself, and then sometimes when I delegate to my staff, which I'm a big proponent of, a lot of times I don't give them what they need. So when you don't give your staff what they need to succeed, when you try to turn something over to them, you're going to get a lot of pushback. And pushback can be either like overt, like, hey, I don't want to do this, or it could be just foot dragging, like, hey, let's just calm down. And if we don't say anything and don't change what we're doing in a couple of weeks, doc will forget about it. And so I think that first off, me wanting to do everything myself, which may be a factor of because I know there's going to be pushback, or when I finally delegate, not giving my staff really what they need, the tools, the environment, stuff like that to succeed, not taking the time to build out like a nice SOP, standard operating procedure for them, or a checklist or a guideline. And so, yeah, we talked about, I have now turned all the 3D printing stuff pretty much in my office over to one really good employee. And so now that I've done that, when I did that, I created really good guidelines, really good checklists, workflows for her, and she's outstanding. And so now that I know how great that is, like, I think the next auxiliary that we're all going to need in dentistry is just one person that's really competent in the practice who can kind of be over all the digital stuff. I mean, I'm like calling them a digital technology assistant, right? So if you got one person that can handle all the hardware, all the software, all the 3D printing, all the scanning, if you're into milling, all the milling, I mean, that's a job, right? And that's a super valuable job for the practice. And I wish I'd taken more time earlier on to build out better, plans for people when I delegated stuff to them.
What about moving forward in dentistry? How do you think AI is affecting dentistry?
Well, so, we're talking about technology, ease of design. I mean, AI has made design so much faster and quicker. It's really making same day stuff so much more possible. I mean, same day crowns has always been possible, but now with AI, I mean, you can have same day most things that you could 3D print or 3D mill. I mean, it's just made the design a lot easier. Now, I know this. You're in Boston, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just got through with an 8-week online course. I did go by there when I was in Boston a couple weeks ago, but they didn't let me on campus. But I did take an online executive course through Harvard Medical School about AI and healthcare. I just finished it. It was actually, it was somewhat tough, not that hard, executive. I'm pretty sure anybody with a doctor before their name and $3,000 could have joined it. But anyway, it was a pretty comprehensive course. I learned so much about what AI can do. AI is really good on error detection. I mean, this is not just dentistry. This is any kind of AI. They can find errors like nobody's business. And so, one way that error detection is sort of bleeding into dentistry right now, if you've seen those companies that have the like AI X-ray software, there's a couple of good ones. We've got one in our office, and so, I have to say, I check 3 hygienists a day. And so, there's times when somebody's got good teeth and I just come in there and I see their bite wings and maybe I don't look at them as close as I should. Well, you run it through the AI. Well, you cannot miss. It's been my experience so far. You can't miss the spots that you really need to look at. And so I have already, every single month I've had this software, it's more than paid for itself just by finding cavities that I probably would have possibly overlooked because I just didn't expect it to be there. So the error detection on the X-rays is really, that's going to be a huge thing for us. And a thing that's coming. I know people that have this. I don't have it yet, but AI note writing. I'm probably going to try this, but man, I hate writing notes so bad. It's like my least favorite thing on the planet to do. But there's some AI programs that if you give it a little bit of information, they can write you some outstanding notes. I don't have a clue about legality of them or stuff like that, but I know that's coming down the pike in my direction soon as I find a good company to do it.
That's awesome. All right, let's wrap up. Tell me about your book, and also want to hear how the dentists out there can get a hold of you.
Well, yeah, man. So here's the book, 3D Printing in Dentistry, and I'm super proud of it. It took me from January until just October to finish it up, get it published. To me, I wrote it. It's not about, hey, this is a real fancy way you can do this with this particular software. It's really a way that any dentist could take this book. It's got outlines on how to create, positions like a digital technology assistant, workflows, how you can get into designing models, clear aligners, dentures, surgical guides, night guards. Got everything laid out as much as my engineering brain can make it analytical like that. A little philosophy mixed in. I really kind of wrote it as a 3D printing 101. And it's been accepted that way. Since I wrote this book, I've actually got to lecture on it to 3 dental schools. And that's been really fun. And so I'm really proud of it. I think that anybody that's not into 3D printing that wants to get into it, or if you really just want some good guidelines on how the best practices on how to get into it, regardless of what software and hardware you want to use, that's how it's written. Anybody in your group, I've got a deal. Anybody I'm on their podcast, I always offer your guests to get this free, just shipping and handling. If you go to free3dbook.com, you can get a copy of that for free. And if anybody has any questions for me, just Dr. Chris Griffin at gmail.com, Dr. Chris Griffin at gmail.com. I'm happy to answer them.
Oh, that's great. Dr. Chris Griffin, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks again for listening to the Stress Free Dentist podcast. And don't hesitate to get in touch with me at info@thestressfreedentist.com. And if you haven't already, please subscribe on your favorite platform and leave us a review. Until the next episode, I'm Dr. Eric Block, the Stress Free Dentist.